the sexiness of the book.
Why am I doing this?
Why does this mean sexy? This is why I'm single. What up, my channel? Welcome back to another video. I'm Messy Jessie, and you're watching I don't know what y'all did to deserve me. I would wish myself upon not even my most mortal enemy. I don't know who I think I am trying to film a best books of 2020 video in May of 2021. I'm sure nobody is watching these videos anymore. I'm sure none of y'all at this point care what my favorite books were of 2020. At this point, filming this video because I want to keep it for my own record. One of the things that I love about my channel is that it is literally a record of my reading. YouTube is my book diary. It's just one big book diary, one big journal of my reading experiences. And I just absolutely love this channel and that y'all are on for this ride. But I'm continuing to digress. As many of y'all know, December was a really hard month for myself and my family. And so many videos never got filmed. I never filmed my worst books, best books, my channel stats. I was supposed to film an anticipated releases of the early year and my top anticipated releases of 2021. None of those videos got filmed because of the situation that my family and I were going through. But I'm in a better place. My family is doing so much better. And I finally feel that I'm in a space. I'm caught up on all the other videos that I needed to get up on my booktube channel. And so I thought now would be the perfect time to release my best books video. I'm so excited to finally be filming this video. I have thought about filming this video every day for the last several months because I have a burning need to share what my favorite books of the year were, even if many of you don't even watch this video because it's so late. I also just really love talking to y'all about what my favorite books are. Even though y'all are not physically here with me, there's just something so soothing about being able to communicate with you, even though it is through this medium. So I love these videos because I feel like I get to share a lot of myself and who I am with y'all. I'm going to be filming this video quite differently from how I normally film these videos. And instead of me going in order from 10 all the way to 1, you have to keep a ranking and guess which one is my favorite. Just to see if you're right or wrong. I just thought it would be a really fun way to film these videos, and I'm gonna film my worst books of 2020 video after this. And I'm gonna do the same thing. So hopefully y'all enjoy it. Very quickly, I would like to do some honorable mentions. These are books that did not make it onto this top 10 list, but are still books that I think about constantly, were my favorites of the year, and are books that I'm going to recommend very readily. The 4 books on that list are Love from A to Z, Nosferatu, Lakewood, and Love Boat Taipei. Kicking off my young adult favorite reads of 2020 is going to be All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. If y'all remember correctly, this was the very first book that I read of 2020, and I was screaming about it from the rooftops on Twitter and on Instagram. I wrote several reviews for this book, and it didn't release until I believe April of 2020. Yes, April of 2020. And I was frustrated because I kept trying to get this on people's anticipated releases. And I just wasn't seeing any hype, very little hype for this book in anticipation of its release. And as y'all know, that anticipation can really make or break a book. And I was really frustrated because this book hit me so hard. But thankfully, I didn't even need to worry because eventually the word got out. And because of all of the buzz and excitement, this book is going to be adapted for television. And I could not be happier. All Boys Aren't Blue is a memoir of queer non-binary activist George M. Johnson. It is a Black queer coming-of-age story delivered in the form of personal essays that touch deep to the rawest parts of your soul. As mentioned, this was an anticipated release, but there was no level of preparation for what this book actually meant to me. George has this way of putting very difficult concepts into the most simplistic language and creating this aha moment in the reader's head. Moments where you're like, I've always felt that, but I didn't know how to communicate it. This book was beautiful because the author was giving me language for things, feelings, phenomena, sensations, and suspicions that I had long held, but didn't have the language to articulate. As you can see, I had a lot of thoughts on this book. This was the first book that I ever put whole sticky notes in instead of tabs. And that was because I had absolutely so much to say, and I would write paragraph notes. This book itself ended up becoming a diary. I worked out some of my deepest and most darkest fears and concerns while reading this book. It is just so deeply near and dear to my heart. It doesn't feel like nonfiction either. It feels like you're talking to a friend. I highly recommend this book for everyone, and this book was marketed toward queer Black boys and queer teens. So if you are older, you have youth in your life that you think really could benefit from this book, I highly recommend it. If you are straight, I beg you to read this book. If you are queer and white, I beg you to read this book. All of the stars and more. Okay, so those were all of the young adult books that made it onto this list. Then we have The Antidote for Everything by Kimmery Martin. This was another anticipated release that blew my expectations out of the water, and those expectations were high to begin with. In this book, we are following two medical doctors. These two are peas in a pod, and their lives get turned upside down when the hospital, which is owned by a religious organization, clinic, when their clinic decides to begin discriminating against LGBTQ patients and denying transgender patients access to healthcare. Now, this is something that is legal to do in the United States. When Jonah refuses to abide by these policies and stands up for one of his transgender patients, they suddenly find drugs in his locker, and he is quickly fired under suspicion of drug abuse with intent to distribute. And this book is about Georgie, Jonah's well-intending best friend, going on a self-decided mission to clear Jonah's name and to advocate for him. This book did a lot. It touched on very, very awful, frustrating issues, things like queer people getting denied access to healthcare, things like sexism and sexual abuse in the workplace, gaslighting, homophobia, just so many really difficult issues. And those scenes where those issues were being portrayed felt very real. But I love that this book did that without giving us too much trauma and pain. And it also still managed to feel... Akasha! It also still managed to feel readable. You were aware of the heaviness, but you weren't suffocated by it. There were moments where I laughed out loud. I loved these characters. They felt real to me. The issues in the book were so beautifully depicted and portrayed. And this book was written from a medical doctor who was touching on issues within her field, which I really appreciated. There was a lot of medical humor in this book that I enjoyed. A lot of it was cringy and punny, and I loved it because I love cringy dad jokes. Those are my things. She instantly solidified herself as an auto-buy author, and I beg all of my straight allies to read this book. I beg anybody who is cis to read this book, and I also really recommend it for queer and trans individuals because this book felt like home. I got so much out of this book. This is a story that I could read and also cry to. And I just loved it. Next up, we have a science fiction novel called Space Between Worlds. This is a book that I read because of all of the booktube hype, and it obviously didn't let me down. Y'all who have been following my channel for a while know that I have a very, very stressed relationship with hyped books. I tend not to enjoy books that are hyped. It sucks, but it is true. And so often I will pick up a book that BookTube is recommending and it just won't be for me. And I'll be really sad about it because I love being able to participate in loving a book along with everybody else. Thank all of the astral gods because this book lived up to the hype. It was Black girl magic. It was everything that I was wanting in a science fiction book and more. In this book, we are following Kara, who for a living hops between worlds, exploring different realities and different selves. Kara has spent her entire life fighting to survive, and when one of her doppelgangers dies in a very mysterious fashion, she begins to investigate the fate of that doppelganger, ultimately has to figure out who is trying to kill her. This was another book that, as you can see, I had a lot of thoughts on. Some of my favorite, most real, most believable characters that I've ever read And I was deeply impressed by this author's ability to establish these characters in one book. This is the standalone, and I just want more. The only criticism that I could give for this book is that I would like a series.
That's my critique.
Kara felt so real, and I related to her. I related to her messiness, her brokenness, her anger at the world, her feeling so isolated and like the black sheep of her family, and her inner turmoil. I even loved her awkward queerness throughout this book. There is this will they, won't they romance between Kara and her boss, who is this amazing woman named Dell. Dell is an Asian woman, and she just has the most fascinating character, and I loved their banter and their dynamics. Even though this is a standalone, which meant you couldn't go super far into the world building in this book still felt complete. I really want to make a dedicated review on this book because I have so much to say and not enough time to say it in. In addition to that, this is one of the most beautifully philosophical and quotable books that I have ever read. And just look at all of my notes and underlines and annotations, and just that's how you know. In addition to that, there was sex worker representation and non-binary characters, and I wasn't expecting any of that, but I loved that we got it regardless. Here's a quote that I very much enjoyed. "The universe erases me, but it also remakes me again and again, so there must be something worthwhile in this image." I can't wait to reread this book. Do not be surprised if I reread this book in 2021. Next up, we have Luster by Raven Leilani, another one of my anticipated reads that blew my expectations, which were high, out of the sky. You are going to see this book on Best Books of All Time's list in the future. This is a debut novel from a Black author who
I have questions for.
My first question is, are you sure this is your first book? Because her command of the English language, her ability to wield a sentence is unreal. This is another book where we are following a broken, damaged, messy Black girl. Again, just near and dear to my heart. So if you like those characters who are kind of broken and grieving and looking for their direction in life, or who have mixed feelings about the direction that their life is taken, you need to read this and Space Between Worlds. And I also love that the covers are similar vibes. In this book, we are following Eddie, who is a 20-something sex-forward, struggling artist trying to make it in New York City. And through a long series of events, she ends up living as a nanny for this, very stuffy white couple, and things get a little bit weird from there. Now, this is a book about sex and failing marriages, crumbling marriages, the secrets that we keep from the people that we love.
And casual racism.
Also, the protagonist of this book struggles with IBS, and I really loved how well that was explored, but also I love that that wasn't her entire character. She was given more characterization than her disability, which I truly appreciated. Now, the only criticism that I can give for this book is that it promises lots of discussions about sex workers and sugar daddy, sugar baby relationships. That's how it markets itself, and you get very little of that. There is some smutty scenes right at the beginning of the novel, which suggests that more of that is going to go on, and it does not. The sexiness of the book,
why am I doing this?
Why does this mean sexy? This is why I'm single, is at the forefront of the novel, and then it just quickly vanishes as the book goes on. So that is one criticism that I had for it, but I still gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The beautiful writing alone that just sits and haunts you. And I listened to the audiobook for this. Another one of my favorite audiobooks in the entire world. You have to read this book, especially if you love beautiful writing. Then we have Remembrance by Rita Woods. If you've followed me on Instagram last year at all, you will definitely have seen and heard me rave about this book. This is a Black fantasy novel, another debut from a Black author that, again, I don't believe this is her first work. She has to be writing under some other author pseudonym that's on the best-selling list, okay? And I feel like I'm subtly implying that you can't be an amazing writer if you are a debut novelist. And that is so not true. I'm just being dramatic. It's just that, again, the command of the English language is so miraculous, and it very much exceeds novelists that I've read and really enjoyed who have multiple books out they've published over decades. That's what I mean when I say, I can't believe this is your first book. because as a debut writer, you're already writing so much better than authors that I've known and loved for years. You know what I'm saying? It's just great. Okay, what is this book about, Jessie? Focus. Remembrance is a novel that braids together the lives of 4 women. On present day, we are following a Haitian female refugee who is trying to survive in America. Also following a woman who lives in Haiti in 1791, as well as siblings who live in New Orleans in 1857. Essentially, the plot of Remembrance is that this amazing, all-powerful Haitian witch has escaped slavery and created a literal world for Black folk to seek refuge in. This world is invisible to white individuals, and this book centers around what happens when their impenetrable bubble becomes penetrable. There are vampires in this book. There are witches. There is amazing spiritualism in this book. There is amazing character work and the writing. As you can see from this creepy smile I have blossomed across my face, I look like the Joker right now. This book, I'm literally out of breath.
And it's not just because I'm out of shape.
It is because I cannot hold this book without remembering its magic, without feeling the weight of its power. Please read it. Please read it. Please. We have another Black fantasy story from the Queen of Wakanda. Let's be honest. N.K. Jemisin, The Stone Sky. I feel like I'm the only person who loves the Broken Earth trilogy where The Stone Sky is my favorite book in the series. I don't know why I worded that so oddly. The Stone Sky is my favorite book out of the Broken Earth trilogy, and I loved every single one of those books. I think that they were all perfect books. But this somehow takes the cake. So if you are a huge Broken Earth fan, please let me know if this is your favorite book in the trilogy, because I would love to not feel alone just for once in my life. Honestly, part of why I put off reading The Stone Sky for so long was because I doubted the Queen. I did not see how she possibly could have wrapped up this calling it a story feels insulting. This world, this pure magic that she created out of pen and paper, I didn't see how she could possibly wrap everything up. Not just because the world was big and convoluted and complex, but how do you bring the reader closure on everything that's happened in these books? Just how?
Make it make sense.
And she did it. And not only did she do it, but she did it better than I could have assumed possible. Let me just give a synopsis. See, I can't even give a synopsis. I just have to gush about this book. It is Waterfall. TLC is gonna come out of nowhere. Just drown me, okay? Just give me death, because I've already had the best thing that life could possibly offer. The Broken Earth trilogy is a series about individuals named Origins who have the ability to stabilize and influence the earth itself. And in this world, the earth has been plagued by seasons that have destroyed it. And we're now living in a post-apocalyptic society where people are struggling to survive. And so essentially this is about what happens when the planet is trying to kill you. And because humanity, origins are oppressed in the society, and whenever an individual is found to be an origin, they are displaced from their family, taken to a training academy where they can only use their powers under express permission, essentially from the government. And if they refuse to be part of this process, they are killed or enslaved and forced to be a part of the process anyway. And in this series, we are following a woman named Essen who is trying to recover her daughter. And you get to follow not only Essen, but the daughter. It's fantastic. Now, let's talk about the Stone Sky. I got a lot of what I wanted. Shafa. Nasan. Shafa. That's all I'm going to say. Those are the only 2 words that I'm going to give. These characters, I think I cried. Y'all who've been following me on this channel for a while know that I am very talkative about books. I go on rants. I go on raves. I cannot give short book reviews. I literally have a series called BookTube is Sleeping on These Books, where I force myself to give short reviews of books that I really want y'all to read. I talk about books so extensively. I give such comprehensive reviews that I physically have to create videos where I force myself to provide succinct ones. And I am speechless right now. It has been at least 7 months since I read this book, if not more, and I am still speechless. I'm still speechless. And that's the review you're gonna get from me. I still don't know how to talk about it.
Moving on.
Switching gears to a Latinx science fiction book, I have Vanished Birds by Simon Jimenez. This is also a debut novel. Debut novels are the best, y'all. They're just so good. This is a multi-POV science fiction story set in space where we are following Captain Nia, who travels throughout time, picking up certain loads and transporting those loads at other places in time. And her life is turned upside down when she is hired to pick up a load that is a 10-year-old boy with special abilities. However, she is not allowed to know what those abilities are. And so this is a book about her crew responding to this child and them all having to get to this distant place without killing each other. The plot is more intricate than that, but I'm not going to give you much about this book because you have to go in knowing as little as possible. It is simply that much better. Here's what I will tell you. There also is a queer Asian protagonist that I absolutely loved. This is a sci-fi book for people who don't love science fiction, people who are a little intimidated by it. I say that because the science-y part of this book is not very in-depth. Now, there is some science in the book that is pretty well described, which I appreciated, but as far as the way that the ship works and, building up the logistics of space travel, all very minimally done. So if you're scared of science fiction, you have to read this book. If you like queer science fiction, you have to read this book. If you like that trope of people on a journey and a crew, you have to read this book. Those are two of my favorite tropes. And if you like beautiful writing, this is a book that haunts me. It's fantastic. I wish so badly that BookTube would read this book because it is just everything. And I cannot wait for his next book. He's officially an auto-buy author for me. And we only have 2 books left, y'all. 2 books left on this list. The second to last book that I'm going to talk about in this video is Follow Me to the Ground. Now, I think that this is also a debut book. I believe that this is a debut. Ada and her father live at the edge of this tiny village where they work healing the sick villagers from their ailments. Their life is smooth and simple until one day Ada meets a man and falls in love. Now, the problem here is that Ada and her father are not human beings. The town is aware of the fact that they're not human, and they do tolerate this without burning them alive on the stake because they are so capable of healing. But what the town won't tolerate is a romantic relationship between Ada and a human boy. And this is a book about what happens when Ada decides to defy both her father and the expectations of the town. One of my favorite horror thriller books of all time. The audiobook is the way to go, but I ran out and got the physical after reading the audio because I just absolutely had to have it. This is creepy and unsettling and fairy tale-esque and violent, but also hazy. It challenges conventional ideas about womanhood, and it is so creative and sick, and it's also about obsession. It is deliciously dark and hauntingly beautiful. I cannot recommend this book enough. I think about this book all the time. All the time. I might reread it this month, y'all. And my last book that I have here is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. As y'all know, this is the first book in a trilogy about a young girl named Rin who studies hard to become a soldier and then is forced to go into this war where ultimately she decides to play with literal gods in order to obtain power. Everybody had been telling me to read this book. I had a feeling that I just wasn't going to love it as much as everybody else did, but reluctantly I decided to read it. And ironically, when I read this book, I was at the lowest point I've ever experienced in my life. And I ended up listening to this book on audio, which was, I believe, over 15 hours long, and I did it in one sitting. This book gave me the much needed break from life that I desperately needed. And I will always be grateful to this book for that. And not any book could have done that. This was specifically the book that I needed. You know when sometimes you find a book when you need it? this was that book for me. And I also have a video where I read 1-star reviews of The Poppy War, which is basically me giving a review of this book. I talk about this book at length in that video for obvious reasons. So I think that would be a really good video to watch if you want my genuine, true thoughts on this beautiful book. But that's all I'm going to say here. All right, now it is time for me to reveal my favorite books of 2020. And I accidentally tricked y'all because that was the actual order of my favorite book. I genuinely didn't mean to trick you. My problem is that I naturally organized these books in my favorite order while I was getting ready to film, and I didn't even realize it. And that just shows you how perfect this order is for me. And honestly, it wasn't until I got to Remembrance that I realized it. I had this moment where I looked at the book as I was holding it and talking about it, and I was like, fuck. Thank you so much for watching this video as late as it is going to come out. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for watching another Bow Ties and Books production. If you want more content from me, you can follow me on my Instagram, which is Bow Ties and Books, but all of my social media links are going to be in the description box below. Stay safe, wear your mask, and I hope to see you in my next video.